Hey everyone, Tom Welly here from forexreviews.info and welcome to this week's edition of the weekly Forex Outlook and Review. Well, in this edition we'll be going over many pairs and many markets once again and looking at some potential areas to look for evidence in the market. So without further ado, let's jump on the charts and just see what the market's saying overall for the upcoming week ahead. Okay, the first pair I'd like to highlight in this review is Euro USD, and I'm on the daily chart. Now, in last week's review, we highlighted that 108.30 zone, didn't we, as a great area on pullbacks into this zone to look for bullish evidence and a potential move the upside. Now, this zone had held multiple times, so it was quite a significant area on this market, and last week was much the same. The market was just starting to pull back, and so I highlighted that if we get the right sort of bullish evidence at this zone, we could have potential move all the way up to that 111.16 zone, being aware of these previous highs looking left as a potential management point to the upside. Now, as you can see, this market moved as expected, gave a nice performing move last week, a nice strong move to the upside from that highlighted zone on this market. Now, this week, as the market has broken and closed above the 111.16 zone, well, this is great news for all those people that are still holding buy trades on this market, and we're just managing positions at that 111.16 zone to the upside on this market. For all those people that are holding buy trades, potentially we could have a much more long-term move all the way up to that 114.48 zone. For all those people that are not in buy trades, potentially what you could be looking for this week is a pullback, looking for pullbacks into the 111.16 zone. You can see the market's just wick tested just recently. This is potentially now a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside. Potentially, if we get that right sort of bullish evidence at the 111.16 zone, potentially we could have a move all the way up to that 114.48 zone to the upside on this market. Okay, well that's it for Euro USD. Okay, the next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is GBP/USD, and I'm on the daily chart. Now, on this market, first thing I'd like to highlight is this market gave a really nice pullback last week, didn't it? All the way into that 146.50 zone. The 146.50 zone was an area that I highlighted in previous reviews as an area to look for bearish evidence and a potential continuation to the downside on this market. Now, much the same I'd like to highlight on this market this week is that this is a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Potentially a move all the way down to that 142.50 zone to the downside on this market. Now, for all those people that are not in sell trades on GBP/USD, potentially what you could be looking for next week is pullbacks on this market and bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Pullbacks into the 146.50 zone is the optimum area to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Potentially a move all the way back down to that 142.50 zone to the downside on this market. Okay, well that's it for GBP/USD. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is AUD/USD, and I'm on the 4-hour chart. Now, this market performed really well last week, didn't it? In previous reviews, we'd highlighted that 69.40 zone is a great area to look for bullish evidence. You can see we've got that nice long-term move all the way up to that 72 zone last week. Okay, so the market hit that potential long-term target. Now, the 72 zone was also an area that we highlighted in last week's review as an area to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. So we can see we've got another nice expected move to the downside on this market as well last week in price action. Now, what I'd like to highlight on this market this week is, well, a potential zone to the downside for all those people that are holding sell trades on this market, and a potential area next week you could be looking for bullish evidence on this market. Now, the zone I'd like to highlight is the 69.40 zone to the downside. If the market comes and tests this zone next week, this is a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence once again and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way back up to that 72 zone. Of course, being aware of these previous low and highs looking left as potential management points to the upside on this market. Now, the other zone I'd like to highlight on AUD/USD is if the market happens to pull back into the 72 zone next week, this is a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Potentially a move all the way back down, being aware of these previous highs and lows as management points to the downside. Potentially a move all the way back down to that 69.40 zone to the downside on this market. Okay, well that's it for AUD/USD. Just highlighting a potential pullback zone if the market pulls back into that 72 zone. A great area to look for bearish evidence once again. As you can see, this market gave a really nice bearish decline last week, so a nice expected move on this market. And also highlighting a potential target and management point to the downside for all those people that are holding sell trades, and that 69.40 zone as a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence next to the downside on this market and a potential move to the upside on this market. Okay, well that's it for AUD/USD. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is New Zealand USD. Now, this market gave a nice expected move last week as well. It was a nice performing pair. In fact, The market overall has been performing really well over the last couple of weeks of price action, giving a lot of nice strong moves from these important zones. Okay, well the first thing I'd like to highlight on New Zealand USD is a bit of a replay on recent price action over the last week, and actually last week and a half to 2 weeks. And that's that 64.50 zone. The 64.50 zone is an area that I highlight as an area to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside. Potentially move all the way up to these pullback highs, looking left, and lows, okay, as a potential management point, or potentially move all the way up to that 67 zone to the upside. Now, in last week's review, we also highlighted that the 67 zone was a great potential target and management point to the upside, and a great area next on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. And as you can see, the market's given another nice expected move from one of these important zones, okay? And that was that 67 zone, a nice bearish move to the downside on this market. So what I'd like to highlight this week on this market is a potential pullback zone for all those people that are not in sell trades on this market. And that is if the market happens to pull back into the 67 zone next week, that this is a great area still in this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Now, as for all those people that are already in sell trades on this market, potentially we could have a move all the way down to these previous highs, looking left, okay, as a potential management point, and these lows, okay, to the downside. Or potentially we could have a move long term all the way down to that 64.50 zone to the downside on this market. Now, the other zone I'd like to highlight on New Zealand USD is the 64.50 zone. This is a great management point to the downside, a great potential target to the downside for all those people that are holding sell trades on New Zealand USD. And it's also a great area next on this market to the downside if the market comes and tests this zone next week to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside. Potentially a move all the way up to at least these previous highs looking left as a potential management point to the upside, or potentially a move all the way up to that 67 zone to the upside once again on this market. So overall in New Zealand USD, just highlighting a potential pullback zone if the market pulls back into that 67 zone. Still a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence for all those people that are not already in sell trades on this market. And also highlighting a potential zone to the downside, which is that 64.50 zone. Great management point, great potential target for all these people holding sell trades and trading this market to the downside, and also a great area next on this market to the downside to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside on this market once again. Okay, well that's it for New Zealand USD. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is US JAPY, and I'm on the daily chart. Now, first thing I'd like to highlight on this market is what did the market do last week? Well, last week the market tested that 121 zone, didn't it? An area on this market where potentially you could be looking for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market. It was an area that acted as decent support and resistance multiple times in the past. Now, as you can see, the price action declined really heavily from this zone and actually came all the way down, breaking below the 118.70 zone and coming all the way down to close near that 116.30 zone on this market. So that's what I'd like to highlight on this market this week, is that the 116.30 is potentially an area where you could be looking for bullish evidence, being aware it is a bit of a counter-trend zone though, people, but the market's just starting to test it right now, so I will highlight. Potentially you could be looking for bullish evidence at this zone and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way up to that 118.70 zone to the upside on this market. Now, the 118.70 zone is not only a potential target and management point to the upside on this market, it's also a potential area to the upside where you can be looking for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market as well. Okay, well that's it for US JAPY. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is US Swiss, and I'm on the daily chart. Now, in last week's review, what did we highlight? Well, we highlighted that 102.25 zone. The market was just testing this important area, and I highlighted that it was a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside, potentially a move long term all the way down to that 98 zone. Now, as you can see, the market tested this zone last week and gave a nice bearish decline to the downside on this market. So this was a nice expected move on US Swiss to the downside. Now, what I'd like to highlight on this market is a potential zone to the downside. This is a potential management point and a potential target to the downside for all those people that are holding sell trades on this market. And that's that 98 zone. The 98 zone to the downside is a great potential management point and target to the downside, and also a great area on this market next to the downside to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way up to at least these previous highs looking left as a potential management point and lows as a potential management point to the upside, or potentially a move all the way long term to that 102.25 zone to the upside on this market. Overall, US Swiss was another nice performing pair last week in price action, giving a nice bearish move to the downside from that 102.25 zone, which is that previous zone that we highlighted in last week's review. Okay, well that's it for US Swiss. Okay, next market I'd like to highlight in this review is silver daily. Now, first thing I'd like to highlight is that this market broke above that important zone, okay, that 1430 to 1440 zone last week in price action, and gave a really strong close to the upside above that important zone. Now, this is very significant because this is an area that we highlighted in previous reviews multiple times as an area to look for potential continuation to the downside. And we'd also highlighted in previous reviews that if the bulls did break above this zone, that it would indicate that the bulls were taking much more control than the bears. And so what I'd like to highlight in this review this week is exactly that, that we do not want to be bearish on this market now the market has broken and closed above this important zone. Instead, we want to be looking for pullbacks and continuation of the upside, now that the market is indicating that the bulls have much more control than the bears. Now, the area I'd like to highlight is if the market pulls back into that 1437 zone, this would now be a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially move all the way up to that pullback high if the market pulls back from here as a potential management point to the upside, okay, or potentially move all the way up to that 1540 zone to the upside on this market. Okay, well that's it for silver. Just want to highlight that potential pullback zone on this market, that 1437 zone is now a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence. And if we get that right sort of bullish evidence at this zone, when we go in the training, we get a potential move all the way up to that 1540 zone to the upside on this market. Okay, well that's it for silver. Okay, next market I'd like to highlight in this review is gold. And this was a great performing market last week, giving another strong move to the upside, all the way up to that 1150 zone and actually breaking above that important zone as well. So this is a great move, a great performing market for all those people that are holding buy trades on this market. Now, just to give a bit of a recap and a replay on this market from the previously highlighted zone that we highlighted on this market in previous reviews, well, that was that 1080 zone. We highlighted this was a great area on gold to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way up to that 1108 zone as a great management point to the upside, or potentially a long-term move all the way up to the 1150 zone. So as you can see, the market performed really well, moving all the way to our long-term potential target to the upside as well, and actually broke above that important zone. So overall, a nice performing pair, giving a nice bullish move to the upside from that previously highlighted zone on this market. Okay, so what I'd like to highlight this week on gold is, well, two potential zones. The first zone I'd like to highlight is a potential pullback zone, and that's if the market pulls back into that 1150 zone. This would now be a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way up to that 1180 zone to the upside. Now, the other zone I'd like to highlight on gold is the 1180 zone. This is a great area to the upside on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside. Potentially, if we get that right sort of bearish evidence at this zone, we could have a potential move all the way back down to that 1150 zone to the downside on this market. Okay, so overall in gold, just holding a potential pullback zone, okay, and the more preferred zone, as this market is indicating it's much more bullish than bearish, and that's that 1150 zone. Okay, great areas to look for bullish evidence, and also highlighting a potential zone to the upside, which is that 1180 zone. Great area to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market. Potentially move all the way down to that 1150 zone. Okay, well that's it for gold. Okay, next market I'd like to highlight in this review is AD CAD, and I'm on the daily chart. Now on this market, I just want to highlight that 98.50 zone once again. This is still a great area on this market. The market's still testing it. Potential area to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside. Potentially move all the way up to that previous high looking left as a potential management point to the upside or potential target to the upside, or potentially all the way up to this high as a potential management point or target to the upside, or potentially even higher on this market. Okay, well that's for AD CAD, just highlighting where the market's testing right now. Still a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside on this market. Okay, next market I'd like to highlight in this review is GPAD, and I'm on the daily chart. Now on this market, what I'd like to highlight is where the market's pulling back into right now, and is testing right now, which is that 203.80 to 204 zone. This is still potentially a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence, and it is testing it quite deeply, so just be aware of that, people. Okay, for all those people looking at this zone for a potential opportunity. And if we get that right sort of bearish evidence at this zone, we could have a potential move all the way down to that previous low, looking left as a potential management point to the downside, or potentially a move all the way down to that 198.40 zone to the downside on this market. So overall in GPAD, just highlighting where the market is testing on this market, still testing it quite deeply, and that's that 204, well, 203.80 to 204 zone. Still a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market. Okay, well that's it for GBP/AUD. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is AUD New Zealand, and I'm on the daily chart. Now, last week this market performed really well. In fact, this market has been performing really well over the last few weeks. In previous reviews, we highlighted that 105.70 zone as a great area to look for bullish evidence and potential move to the upside, potentially move all the way up to that 109 zone. And in last week's review, we highlighted that 109 zone as a great area to look for bearish evidence and a potential decline to the downside, potentially move all the way down to that 105.70 zone to the downside. Now, as you can see, the market has performed really well, getting a lot of nice, strong moves from these important zones. So what I'd like to highlight this week on this market is that the 105.70 zone is a great potential target to the downside. It's also a great management point to the downside for all those people that are holding sell trades on this market. It's also a great area next on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially move all the way back up to that 109 zone to the upside on this market. Of course, being aware of this previous low and highs, looking left, as potential management points to the upside on this market. Okay, well that's it for AUD New Zealand. Okay, next pair I'd like to highlight in this review is Euro GBP, and I'm actually on the weekly chart on this one, so I want to show you guys a bit of a larger view of this market and looking at those major turning points on the weekly chart, just to get a bit more clarity and just to see these zones in a little bit more detail. Okay, so what I'd like to highlight on this market is, well, two zones I'd like to highlight. Okay, the first zone I'd like to highlight is a potential pullback zone, and that's the 74.11 zone, or the 74 zone. This is a great area on this market if the market pulls back in this zone. Okay, now the market has broken and closed above this important zone to look for bullish evidence and a potential move to the upside, potentially a move all the way up to that 77.55 zone to the upside. Now the 77.55 zone is also another zone. You can see the market resisted here just recently in price action, gave a bit of a bearish move to the downside from this important zone. Bearing in mind this is the weekly chart, so okay, so these declines are actually much bigger. Okay, and just that we're looking at this on the weekly chart, these important zones. So the other area I'd like to highlight is the 77.55 zone, which the market is potentially pulling back into and potentially may test next week. This is a great area on this market, once again, to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside, potentially move all the way back down to that 74 zone to the downside on this market. So two zones I just want you guys to be aware of on Euro GBP. The more preferred zone is that 74 zone if the market pulls back in that zone. Okay, it's a great area on this market to look for bullish evidence and a potential continuation to the upside, potentially a continuation all the way up to that 77.55 zone. And that 77.55 zone is also a great area on this market to the upside, which it looks like the market will test early next week, potentially, to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market. Okay, well that's it for Euro GBP. Okay, next market I'd like to highlight in this review is Swiss JAPY, and I'm on the daily chart. Now on this market, I just want to highlight a potential pullback zone, a potential continuation zone on this market, as this market is in a downtrend, and that's that 119 zone. This is a great pullback zone. If the market pulls back in this zone next week, you can see the market pulled into this zone just recently in price action and gave a nice bit of a bearish move to the downside on this market. So I just want to highlight that if the market pulls back into this zone next week, that 119 zone, that this is a great area on this market to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside, potentially move all the way down to that pullback low as a potential management point to the downside on this market, or potentially move all the way down to that previous major low, or potentially even lower on this market. Okay, well that's it for Swiss JAPY. Just holding that 119 zone is a great area on this market next if the market pulls back in this zone next week to look for bearish evidence and a potential move to the downside on this market. Okay, well that's it for me for this review this week. Once again, we went over many markets and potential areas to be aware of next week. Before I go, we'll highlight for all those people that haven't checked out the Forex training at the site just yet, such as the Engulfing Trader, the 5-day trend trading series, or the candlestick training series just yet, where you can find out all about this Forex training by clicking on the links below this video. And I'll leave some links below for you all. Also bearing in mind, all the Forex training at the site goes over the same core trading methodology I use myself personally on a regular basis to trade the Forex market. Anyway, to find out more on the Forex training, just click on the links below this video. Okay, with that being said, I appreciate you all. I appreciate all the support and the likes and the shares. I mention this nearly in every single review, but I really do appreciate it, people. So if you did appreciate this video this week, please do not forget to click that like button. If you do happen to know someone that would benefit from watching this week's edition of the review, feel free to share them the link to watch this video. Okay, well, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you all have a great trading week next week, and happy trading.